All right, we are pleased to have with us today one of the greats in Baylor baseball history. Certainly qualifies for this event, Lunch with a Legend. Kip Wells came out of Missouri City Elkins High School to Baylor and left Baylor as a first-round draft pick of the Chicago White Sox. We'll talk about all that and get more, so join me in welcoming our guest today, Kip Wells. Welcome, appreciate it. You got your own mic there. We're on? Yeah, we're good. We're good. Appreciate you making the trip up from Houston. You're still in Houston now.
Yep.
Very good.
3 hours away.
Catch everybody up on what you're doing these days.
Wow. So it's been a while since I've set foot in this building. But now I live in Houston. I have 3 children, 11, 10, and 7. I coached for the Dodgers for the last couple years in the minor leagues as a pitching coach. Post-career, and I have a small baseball business in Houston that I run that's kind of a pitching-specific, arm care-related. I'm still kind of trying to define what exactly it is, but it's a variation of a lab like the team has here to try to just help improve the quality of the data production and the health of the kids' arms, and so it's fun, and I have. After having coached for a couple of years in the minors, with my kids being small, I didn't want to look up and have raised a 23-year-old from the Dominican and not raise my own 10-year-old, you know. So it just made more sense for me to, you know, put the family in the situation to be involved in their lives as opposed to chasing another baseball dream and at the cost of that.
Good. Well, it's great to have you back here on campus with us. Is that, so you describe what you're doing now is advising and coaching young pitchers and young players about taking care of their arms. Is there enough of that that's done these days? Or, you know, you keep hearing the bad stories about guys throwing out their arms so early.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is that baseball is such a game-based sport as opposed to a training-based sport where, you know, from June 1st to July 31st, teams are going to play 7 weeks in 7 different cities in the southern part of the United States. And if you're good, you kind of make that tour. But are their arms in good shape before that? Are the quality of their pitches been looked into to say, what should you be throwing? What do you throw? Do you understand why you're doing what you're doing? And then other than that, just getting somebody who's a pretty good athlete, whose arm slot or mechanics are just kind of out of whack, and they're running the risk of, you know, they're having growth plate issues or things that, you know, some of that's just throwing too much and throwing too hard. But in general, like, limit the amount of innings you're putting on your arm at 14, because if you're ever going to have a chance to monetize that into a college scholarship or something further, then don't get too busy too early trying to validate that, because I didn't play till I was 11. And I ended up playing till I was 40, so it's, you know, be careful. And then on the same token, you do want experience, life experience, dealing with, you know, trials and failure and all that stuff, but you also don't want to do it at the risk of your arm, you know? Pitch a little bit, just don't pitch every week.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you saying, are you of the school that some of these guys, you know, they play whatever level they are, and then they jump on a select team and play the rest of the year doing that?
Yeah.
Are you saying that's too much?
I mean, I think you just got to have a log of your innings, you know. You just got to be paying attention to it, because the challenge is you get a call that's like, hey, we need Johnny this weekend, and you know, subconsciously you get a little bit of a ego boost out of that. And, you know, is it valuable to do that? I don't know. But all that being said, just trying to, you know, from a pitching standpoint, a lot of people would want to come in just like going to a driving range as a golfer and just want to whack balls. And then the golf coach says, all right, put the club down. We're going to put this stick on you, and we're going to have you do some of this. And you're like, that's not fun. I want to hit balls. So they come in to get a pitching lesson, and they want to pitch. And I'm like, all right, well, we get some data. We get some information about what you're doing, and then now you need to go train because you're not stable or you're not mobile or you're not pliable. So you've got, you know, the thought is I want to come in and throw a 45-pitch bullpen, and you really only need to throw 15 pitches, and then you need to go get in a lunge position and be able to separate your hips and shoulders. So but I think in my experience, like once the people come in and realize that I'm not just sitting on a bucket and catching a bullpen, that you're just speaking on another level, that people are like, wow, I didn't know there was that much that went into this. And you're like, well, there is if you do it for 30 years, you know. So it sells itself in a sense of, you know, the kid's best interest at heart, and telling them take it easy on how much you're playing, but also give them good information. It's as soon as they apply what you're talking about, immediately the command gets considerably better, and you're like, wow. So it kind of, you know, it should validate itself, you know.
That's good. That's good advice from a guy who was a high school All-American, Baylor All-American, pitched in the major leagues for 12 years and still involved. So that's really good advice.
Yeah.
You saw our pitching lab. We're proud of that. Coach Strauss is here. What do you think of our pitching lab here at Baylor?
Well, I mean, I think it's just like anything else that's a trend in sports to be collecting more data and more information, and you've got to do what you've got to do to stay relevant in this like kind of analytic community. Because I mean, you don't even have to see a kid throw nowadays to be able to pull up his data and say like, well, we're interested based on these criteria. You know, there's still some, check out the parents, see if are they 6'5" or are they 5'9"? You know, we need to know some of these things. But in order to be able to communicate nationally, you need a hub that you can do that kind of stuff out of. And I mean, I think there's paralysis by analysis in a lot of this stuff, where you have a ton of information, but you still need to go sweat and work and get better. But the amount of stuff we can collect nowadays is just kind of insatiable. It's just going to continue. So you got to be able to speak their language a little bit, but you also have to be able to unplug that and say like, I understand what you're talking about, but I still try to use the eye test to say like, does that play, regardless of what the machine says.
I hear you. And you didn't pitch, you didn't start until you were 11? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I played in the street. I had a wiffle ball game in my backyard that I had a batting cage my dad built a batting cage in our backyard around that time, but for whatever reason, I don't even know if select ball was, you know, there was all-star teams, and there was, you know, that was 1987 or something, so it was, you know, pre-cell phones.
yeah, so long ago. I wish your dad was here. Tell Robert we missed him. Yeah, be sure and tell him hello. He was a fixture during your time at Baylor. What do you remember about the recruiting process out of Elkins High School? Highly recruited, I'm guessing. How did you end up at Baylor?
Well, I mean, I wasn't necessarily some husky, bearded guy at 17 that you could tell was, you know, going to chop trees down, you know. But I eventually kind of, as a late bloomer, I mean, I kind of started to kind of show some ceiling potential, I think. And from that standpoint, like, I wasn't the most polished guy. And, I mean, we had our high school I guess you call it a select team. Our high school, like, summer team had 5 first-round draft picks on the team. Like 3 of them were first-round picks that year in high school. You know, Jeff Austin and Andy Yount. Austin went to Stanford, but those guys were throwing 92, 94, 96, and I was throwing like 90, 92 maybe. But I mean, projectability-wise, I looked like you know, there was some ceiling there yet to be. And so I always wanted to go to Texas because my dad played at Texas, and my mom went to Texas, and my sister went to Texas. But it was like, at the time, it wasn't. There was just too much uncertainty with what was going on. A&M and Baylor were basically the 2 that I was narrowed down to, and I think just the relationship. My dad did and does a good job of asking enough questions and probing deeply enough to kind of understand what people's agendas are, and I think he found the quality people like Coach Smith and Coach Jonigan that's here, and we felt like this was an opportunity for me to come in and immediately impact, you know, as opposed to going to somewhere else and watching somebody else do it. I was going to come in and participate. You know, I still had to earn a spot on the weekend, which I had to pitch midweek games for a month or so. But there was something to be proud of. The fact we had 18 guys, I think, as freshmen. So we came in and kind of, you know, we had them outnumbered, and so we got to play, and so I was kind of a part of the whole beginning of this whole development that's going on, and it's really cool to come back and see and have perspective to know that you saw it when it wasn't, you know.
Before Baylor Ballpark, I mean, you were here as we ushered in Baylor
Ballpark.
Ballpark.
We got a fence, and then we got a scoreboard.
And that's about it.
We were supposed to get the stadium done, but I think we got pieces of it.
The year after you left is when we got the stadium, right?
Yeah.
So Kip was here 96, 97, 98, left after his junior year, first-round draft pick of the Chicago White Sox. But you talk about that core of guys that were here, either came in with you or came in the year after you. Those were some really good teams.
Yeah. And I still have friendships with those guys, so we still keep in touch. And, and so, like, the guys at my table, some of them were from Minnesota. I still have buddies. Jared Visker was in Minnesota. Obviously, pitchers kind of hang out with pitchers. So, like, position players are kind of their own breed, and I guess they would say the same thing about us. But we end up palling around more often than not because we're running distance together, or we're playing golf, or we're doing things that the meathead position player guys didn't. We're a little snobby, I guess.
There you go. That's why you hang out by yourself, because they didn't want to be around you.
Right. That was fun, though. The quad, living in the quad and having kind of forcing 15 guys to kind of coexist. I mean, those are the life lessons that, having not chosen to go pro out of high school, like whether you flourish academically or not, I think the life lessons that you learn in that period of time are, just a skill set that anybody needs. And this environment obviously is a solid one to kind of be rooted in and not get, subjected to a lot of the, what's going on in the current college campus scene, which is, sad.
As I think back about your time here, and a lot of y'all will remember these teams, but that 98 team was really good. You set a record that is still in the books. You won 13 games that year, and that's the most any Baylor pitcher has ever won in a single season. But I think about, Jason Jennings was on that team a year behind you, but the hitters on that team, that was a really good, I mean, this year's Baylor team is a really good hitting team, but that 98 one was really good also.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy Dotson would hit balls into the river that were, I don't even know if we had a way. I'm surprised we don't have like a launch-o-meter or something out there already. But the bats have changed a lot too, to where you've got some of the volatility of the ball coming off is, it was pretty dangerous. I mean, and we had a good mix. A lot of Houston guys. I mean, I was a Houston guy, and so there was a fair amount of local representation from parts of the state, and we had a good mix of veteran guys that kind of welcomed us in, like the Marty Crawfords of this world, and Steve Reinches and Steve Martinez, and guys, guys that kind of participated right out of the gates with us, but yet gave us the keys, I guess, to kind of continue it. And Jason did a great job, and I was always, fond memories of like the Christmas parties where I brought golden tennis shoes that I had sprayed gold to give away to the Christmas party. That my goal was to like make a splash with something idiotic. And back in the day, the Golden Spikes was like the Heisman of baseball. And so I figured I'd just take a pair of cleats and spray paint them gold and give them away because I was going to win this award, which subsequently Jennings, I guess, won, and I never did. So it's kind of poignant.
Now those Christmas parties, you could add to this, but those were legendary for you guys. Yeah. Everybody would bring something,
it's like a white elephant
gift, right?
Yeah. And one year I had made a T-shirt with my own image on the front, and then my number on the back was like 1.5 million or something, because I was predicting how much money I was going to make.
That was your number on the back.
And then they all fight over it, and then you get like a little bit of a laugh out of it because you stirred up the hornet's nest a little bit.
It's pretty
and made
good.
Everybody mad, but it
was part of the party.
Yeah, I framed a picture of myself or something. I don't know. It was very narcissistic in a way.
Well, and one of the white elephant gifts one year I remember was your personalized license plate.
Oh yeah. Did Blair steal that, or did I give it away?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I wouldn't have been surprised if one of my teammates had stolen it.
Would he be the one you would think if somebody stole it?
Yeah, I mean there were some
Jimmy Blair
antics that went on that were, probably shouldn't even talk about them here.
No, to a certain level you can talk about them. Yeah.
But I mean, we were door-to-door neighbors, and their apartment would have like Q-tips stuck to the wall where a guy had cleaned his ears and then he just fired it. And it was stuck there for...
Is everybody finished eating? Let's make sure. Okay.
So, I mean, you knew in our apartment that it was like clean, and we were civilized human beings, and the other ones, they were a little loose on the hygiene, and then stuff would end up on your car that was from the restaurant or from their toilet or things.
Nice.
Yeah, just good times. Good times.
That's great. Aren't these great memories to relive?
Oh, yeah.
It's just great.
There was a guy named C.S. Randall that lived in the quad. C.S. was legendary.
Yeah.
He would roam around at night trying to catch guys with girls or anything nefarious that was going on. And yeah, he was like a Disney character, and you could see him popping up out of a trash can or something.
Yeah. He was around.
Yeah.
He was definitely around. Who were your roommates?
Eric Nelson, who was the second baseman.
Yeah.
Ryan Metzger.
Okay.
And Ryan Ridenauer. Remember Ryan Ridenauer?
Oh, Ryan Ridenauer.
Lefty.
I hear.
And his dad owned like convenience stores, and so we had all these Bud Light and Budweiser like neon lights in our apartment. It looked pretty tacky.
Really
but since
lit
his
up.
dad owned a convenience store, we all had like the things that you see in a convenience store. We'd be like, I'd like to have that. It's like a blow-up futon that has Bud Light written all over it. Like,
he had all
we
of
had
them.
it. Yeah.
And wasn't he one that was? Weren't you two going back and forth?
Oh yeah.
Pretty seriously about who was gonna be drafted higher?
Yeah.
Who was gonna make the most money in Major League Baseball?
Yeah, just totally great subject matter to be talking about. Yeah.
That's good. So who were the guys? Not your roommates, but who were the ones in the apartment right next to you?
Oh, so we had. Maybe Dotson was my roommate. We had Topolsky, we had Blair, we had, there were four of them. Then there was like there was some transfers like Greg Dry, and we had some like older guys that didn't even need to be living in the quad, but yet we're still being forced to kind of coexist. So they would, and then,
That's
so
great.
There were. So I don't know if the quad is still there. I haven't rolled by there.
It is. I'll take you over there if you'd like.
I need to power wash that place.
Yeah, I'm sure they have many times over. So one thing, you had a great playing career here, and we'll talk about beyond that, but one thing you get credit for that will never go away is you gave Jason Jennings his nickname.
Yeah?
I mean, he said, I did text him, and he said, you get full credit for Diesel.
Sweet. Yes. Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah. I did know
That's
that.
you.
But that name has gotten like, I should have trademarked that.
Yes.
Other people have taken it.
Yeah.
And he had that giant butt, so it worked.
Yeah.
You know, it looked like a diesel.
Diesel. You shortened to Dees for Jason Jennings.
Yeah.
He says he's really not sure if you meant it as a slam or meant it as complimentary,
it's
but
both.
you get credit for it. Both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you talk to certain people in your older age, and then when they answer the phone, they call you by a nickname that you hadn't heard in a while.
Yeah.
Like, so when I was in Colorado with the Rockies, I was rehab assignment. I had a blood clot in my arm, and I had to come back from being out. And I went out and threw live batting practice to the team before a game, and I broke a bunch of bats. And I came in, and they were like, "Hey, how'd it go, man?" And I was like, I was throwing chainsaws out there, meaning I'd broken a bunch of bats. So now, to this day, when a person from the Rockies calls me that we're just having a conversation, they'll be like, "Hey, what's up, Chainsaw?" And I'm like, "I'm not Chainsaw, but I am to those guys because I made this smart aleck comment that I was throwing."
Great.
So you never know when your nicknames are going to be revisited, but
That's great.
nicknames are good.
Chainsaw. All right, Rockies, one of the teams you played for, 9 different Major League Baseball teams. Can I see if I can name them in order? Do you know them in order?
I think I do.
All right, correct me if I'm wrong. Drafted by the White Sox, Pirates, Rangers,
Cardinals.
Yes, Cardinals,
Royals.
Rockies, then Royals.
Royals, then Rockies.
Okay, Royals, then Rockies, and then, I don't know.
Washington, Cincinnati, San Diego.
In San Diego, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, I couldn't do it.
With a 2-year break from like 2010 to 2012, I couldn't even get a job. And then all of a sudden, I'm still throwing. They're like, "Hey, you still pitching down there in Houston?" I was like, "Yeah, come look." And lo and behold, a month later, I'm jogging in from the bullpen in San Diego. I'm like, what did I have to do to get a job? I had to sit out for 2 years. It was, by the end of my career, I was kind of like scratching my head, like I can't keep up with this.
That's pretty good.
The age requirement is pretty low now. You got to be 18 to play in the big leagues.
Did you do you have a jersey from every team you pitched for?
Yeah.
Or
At
something?
least
Your
one.
jersey cap?
Yeah.
That's a full closet then.
I know. I went to go get them all framed at one point. I was like, because I had this batting cage thing that I was going to do. I was like, I'm going to have all my swag laid out everywhere. And I got the bill for like framing 9 jerseys, and I was like, pass, bring them back. Like, I just hung them in the rafters for free.
Yeah, that would be expensive.
It's like $3,000 worth of frames. So I was like, no.
$3,000.
I mean, yeah, at Michael's, they were like, buy one, get one half off, and it was still hot. I was like, nah, I'll go like old school basketball gymnasium style. And
that's great.
those are the kind of things when you open a small business, you're like, ooh, people are going to love this. And then like, you have to point it out, like, hey, look, I got a bunch of jerseys up
way
there.
up there high. Was the Pirates the team you spent the longest with?
Yeah.
Was that like 4 years there?
Yeah, 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was a good, I mean, when you first go to Pittsburgh, you're thinking, what bet did I lose? But on the same token, over the time being there, it was a good, we found different areas of the city that we lived in, and, got to kind of, I tried to live urbanly, like in town and cities, just because it was closer to the ballpark, and I didn't want to, have some long commute to the stadium. Yeah. So in general, wherever I was, we stayed somewhere that was a place you could go eat dinner at 10 o'clock at night and, not have to drive through a, fast food to do it in the, suburban areas. So yeah, I enjoyed Pittsburgh, and obviously we weren't very good, but those were some of my better years.
That's cool. And did you get married while you were in Pittsburgh?
Good question.
It was around that time.
We got married at home in Houston, but it was 04, so yeah, I would have been a Pirate then.
And the reason I ask that, or even bring that up, is tell everybody how you proposed to Emily. This is a great story.
Where'd you dig this one up?
I just try to do a little homework.
Good job.
Thank you.
So anyway, there was going to be a bobblehead giveaway in Pittsburgh, and they did like a campaign for who was going to get the bobblehead doll. And like, I wasn't going to get it because I was having a good year, but it was like Aramis Ramirez and Mike Williams, another guy. And so like all my family in Houston and some of the folks here like got online and like voted for me. And so I ended up winning the right to have the bobblehead doll named after me, but little did everybody know that like all these people in Houston were like plugging the ballots. So anyway, I ended up with a bobblehead doll. Then, so Emily, my wife now, came in for whatever reason for that series, and I decided I needed somehow to propose that wasn't some cheesy, not that this wasn't cheesy, but I got the bobblehead doll the night before they were going to give it out the next morning on a Sunday or something, and I put the ring in the doll, and then I gave her the doll in the box and had her unpack it, and that bobblehead doll's still in my closet. So it's
nice.
And it hasn't been broken, but most of them have been shattered by a kid or two that just whip it around a little bit. But
it's a pretty good way to propose to your now wife, Emily.
Bobblehead dolls are kind of fun.
Sure,
this one didn't look all that much like Linda.
Did it look like Aramis Ramirez more than it looked like you? And they just put your name on there.
Yeah, had a goatee. I couldn't grow a goatee if I tried.
This doesn't really look like Kip, but we're going to put his name on there. Is Kip your real name? Do you have a given name? We're Robert.
I'm Robert Kip.
Where did Kip come from?
My dad and mom, I think they just wanted us to have names that wouldn't come out as nicknames, which didn't necessarily help because I ended up Kipper by the end of my days. My sister's Worry, which is kind of a strange name as well, like Lori with a W. I think they knew a guy named Kip Jordan. I don't know who he was, but that's where the name came from. And my sister's name was like Lady Bird Johnson's daughter's name or something. So it was like, so Worry and Kip, those are pretty strange.
All right.
Occasionally I meet a Kip or with 2 P's or 1 P, so
there's not a lot of Kips out there.
I know, and I'm kind of critical of other Kips.
Uh-huh.
Because if I see somebody with my name, I'm like, come on, dude. Like,
live up to it.
You better not. I'm like, I'm disappointed. I'm going to start calling myself something else. If I got to share my name with somebody that doesn't meet my standards. So at 9 major league stops, and there were a few others minor league stops.
Yeah. What was your favorite? Was Pittsburgh your favorite place to play and live in, or was there another that was a favorite?
I mean, having success is a huge component to enjoying your time. So if you're not having fun, I mean, living in Chicago was fun. I enjoyed that at the beginning of my career, but I was pretty stressed out about like surviving in the big leagues. So I had a good time, but I still was like, I never just could sit back and relax and think, all right, I've made it, And I don't know that you ever really do that anyway. But on the same token, it was always fun to, be a little more visible in the community if you're doing well. I would be
Sure.
hiding in the corner if I was like
right.
St. Louis. I was like 6-19. I won like 1 month's worth of games in 5 months. So it was.
Nobody's buying your dinner in St. Louis.
Well, maybe the other team. But yeah, so I mean, I enjoyed all those stops, but success was the most was in Pittsburgh, and I was young, and and then you have a family, and things just become, logistically trying to get a suite in towns because you've got a baby or 2 babies, or so it just becomes a little more arduous the longer you're around, but makes you appreciate what you have.
That's cool. You never pitched for the Astros. I'm sure you that would have been great.
Yeah.
Among your 9 teams, if you could have been pitching in your hometown at some point.
I would have liked to have worked for him. So shout out if you're still looking for a pitching coach.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
But yeah, I mean the Rangers. I mean I ended up with those guys at the trade deadline. They ended up trading me there. In Houston, I mean they had Drayton McClain, who was a Baylor guy. I was like, hey, hello,
exactly.
Jason got a chance to pitch there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, on the other hand, like I think living in your town where if you end up becoming a recognizable person in that community, like I think that's somewhat of a blessing that, not that I wouldn't have taken a World Series ring for the Astros, don't get me wrong, but it does change the dynamic of where you live if people know you as something other than just a guy in the community. If you were like ex-Astro, I think that would get kind of tired. I would get a little, you wouldn't have your kids would kind of have this skewed view of, people always coming up to you to kiss the ring. That's not reality in most cases. So it's, I would have liked to have played, but I mean, being in National League Central for as long as I got to come here 3 times a year. So It was good. I got to change out clothes, and I got to sleep in my own bed, and then I, go back on the road and do it for another 6 weeks. So being in the National League, AL West would be a little bit of a beatdown to have to go to Seattle and head west every time the Astros do now. That's not a desirable commute if you have a choice.
Do you still think of the Astros as a National League team?
Of course, yeah.
It's weird, isn't it? I mean, I still slip.
Yeah.
Thinking they're now in the American League.
I know, and all the what do they call it? Interleague play. It used to all happen like for 2 weekends a year.
Right.
And now it's sprinkled throughout the year, and so on opening day you could be playing the Brewers. And I'm like, no, that's not. If you're in the American League, you need to be playing the A's. So. Yeah, I mean, I think you get accustomed to seeing certain teams, just like the Big 12 from Southwest Conference. I mean, there was, my freshman year was the last year of the Southwest Conference, and so we had, other rivalries that would kind of fall off, I guess, with TCU and other things. And so those were, who knows? I think the realignment stuff seems like it happens all the time, but
it does, maybe slowing down a little bit.
Yeah.
What was that transition like from end of the Southwest Conference to the starting of the Big 12? You were right in the middle of that.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like, the Southwest Conference was pretty localized to this part of the state, where we were all kind of in this area to then have to go play in Nebraska and go play in Iowa, and why they play baseball in Iowa, I don't know.
Well, they don't anymore.
Yeah, good point. But I appreciated the fact that Rice was in our division, and you had, was SMU playing baseball at that time?
I don't think so.
I don't think they were. But we had, yeah. So I liked the fact that we were, because I grew up watching Southwest Conference. I would go to U of H game against Texas and watch, whoever it was that was the hot shots back then, and so I would still like to see as much of Baylor and Houston as I can, but other than a first pitch tournament or a midweek game, it's kind of, a lost opportunity. But hey, the Big 12's a good place to be.
There's a lot of positives of the Big 12, but there's a lot of people that remember very fondly those relationships with the Southwest Conference also. You got to walk through this room back here. It's the Southwest Conference room here at the Texas Sports Hall of Fame. So if you had to pick one game, one highlight game for you at Baylor, during your time at Baylor, is there one game that stands out above every other one?
No. I mean, there was, I don't know, I think just knowing that you were going to have a Friday night start against a big team, and then you're, allowing your, the fact that you spent the day preparing for those big games, and I don't know. I think it's just the fact that we were relevant on the map, and we were holding our own. At that time, we weren't necessarily like supposed to make ourselves. We weren't always in the same conversation with Texas and A&M, and even Oklahoma or something at times. And so I think just the fact that I had the opportunity and to be relied on, and I was able to do well. I mean, there's just been pitched so many games in my life that it seems like
none really stand out.
No, I mean, I see pictures of myself on those cards and stuff, and I mean, I look like a kid.
It's a great picture.
Yeah,
it's a great picture.
So yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, I remember pitching and like there's random memories of like Steve Reinches hitting a home run over the center field at U of H that he hit a ball like must have been 550 feet
wow.
with those bats that were still like juiced,
right.
And you would when you would see like Lance Berkman and you would see Brandon Larson, guys that were hitting just tanks with these bats that were like responsive as all get out. So I mean, those were tough times to be a pitcher because if those guys barreled up those balls, they were not coming back. And then I'll go watch a game sometimes in the last 5 years, and it's like off the bat, and you're like, oh wow, like
different bats,
different world.
Yeah.
So it, and I had a high esteem for certain guys that. Ryan Roop, a guy that was a pitcher at A&M, and guys that I would see in the off season and stuff. So, being shoulder to shoulder with some of those guys is, growing up watching Brooks Kieschnick and guys that were tearing it up and just being in the same conversation it's an honor.
How about in the majors? Any particular game? You had one great game that stands out above the others?
Well, I mean, I had a few that were. I had one game where I struck out 13 in a complete game shutout, and that was after I had gotten into like an altercation with the manager the day before. Like, so it was like dramatic because actually it wasn't the day before, it was the start before. Okay, I'll tell you the story.
Okay, good.
So anyway.
Who were you with then?
I was with the Pirates. Lloyd McClendon was our manager.
Okay.
And it was a day game after a night game, and it was at old RFK Stadium, which was the old football stadium. I go out there, and I'm like, I walked 3 maybe in the first inning. It was hot, and we had a extra inning game the night before. And I'm muddling through the inning, and I should do better than that because I'm better than that. So anyway, he comes out to the mound, and he's mad at the umpire, and he's mad at me, and he cusses me out on the mound. I won't tell you what he said, but then he walked off and got thrown out of the game by the umpire.
For cussing you out?
No, for cussing the umpire out after he cussed me out. So then I get out of the inning, and I come back in, and the pitching coach is like, hey, you're done. And I was like, what? And he was like,
wow,
you're out of the game. And so the manager had told the pitching coach, take me out when I come in. And we had just played an extra inning game, and I thought this was a tacky move, and it was, petty, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So I'm fuming. I end up going into his office and like asking him, heatedly, like, why are you doing this? This is not the right time to send me a message, like, So long story short, he ends up getting up and trying to get me to he's encouraging me to hit him, and I'm like, I'm not going to hit you, Lloyd.
Wow.
So I ended up shoving him away at one point, and these other coaches that were sitting right outside came in and broke it up, and nothing was going to happen, but he was trying to provoke me. So then, long story short, that game happens, and I'm like, I'm out of here. I want out of Pittsburgh. The next start, I go out and I go complete game shutout with 13 Ks, and the first person to come to the mound to give me a hug is Lloyd McClendon. And I was
Your best friend in the world.
What up, Lloyd? Like the picture on the front page is like me going like this, and he's
great.
locked in. Like, I told you. I was like, really, Lloyd? So anyway, that was a good game. I hit a home run, you need to YouTube it so at least it has another 5 hits on it. But I hit a 457-foot home run in Pittsburgh, which was like the longest home run of a Pirate at that time.
Oh, come on.
And I had a complete game shutout going that game, and then the closer came in and blew it, and we didn't win the game. So I had a shutout going, and I hit a bomb.
Wow.
That was a good game, but then I didn't even get a win. So
you didn't even get the win out of it.
I can't even be happy. I'm like, yeah, it was a tough time tonight. We need those guys tomorrow. I still believe in them. You're like,
you got a heartfelt hug from your manager.
Yeah. So yeah, those are a couple nuanced games that were fun. I mean, there's opening days are always cool when you see flyovers and stuff that's, you know, famous people. St. Louis had we would see a lot of, you know, Jack Nicklaus would come in, or, you know, Belichick, or, you know, he would bring in famous coaches, and, you know, it's always fun to meet.
That's cool.
You know.
Who was the manager there?
Tony La Russa.
Tony La Russa, okay.
Yeah.
Very good. He's pretty well connected.
Yeah.
What about, you mentioned the blood clot, and that kind of popped up more than once, didn't it? How'd you get through that?
Well, the first time I didn't really know what was wrong. I went to spring training and my arm just felt dead, and it wasn't really a strength thing, but like anytime I would start exerting and throwing, my arm would just feel like a dead arm is what we thought it was. And so I was like, all right, for a week or two, I'm icing it, and I'm, you know, this is like the second week of February, so it's not a good sign that like I'm in this shape and it hasn't even started. So anyway, I threw another, you know, but anytime I started throwing, about 10 minutes into it, my arm would just start to ache, you know, and it wasn't getting the circulation wasn't getting rerouted back to the heart fast enough. And so I ended up getting an ultrasound, and they were like, yep, you've got a blocked artery basically from your armpit to your arm.
Good
and it was getting pinched somehow. And so I thought they could go in there and just poke it with a needle and suck the clot out, and we're on our way. And they were like, no, once the artery's damaged, we got to replace it. So I took one out of my leg and put it in my arm. And I made a recovery from that. Like 6 weeks later, I was pitching again in the big leagues, or maybe it was 2 months, but I mean, it was that season. And unfortunately, that was my free agent year, so it didn't help that I was like some Carfax guy now who has frame damage, you know.
Carfax.
So, yeah. So, and then it resurfaced a couple times later, and so at that point, like cold weather and stress, I mean, basically when I got done, they were like, don't drink caffeine, don't get stressed, don't get your heart rate up, you know, don't pitch in cold weather. I'm like, well, what, you know, I need all these things. So so from that point on, it just became arduous to pitch in relief and stuff at times was a challenge. You go to San Francisco and it's 50 degrees, and I'm waiting for the first 2 hours of the game, and then the phone rings and it's like, Kip, get going. And all of a sudden your heart's racing, and by the time I get to going into the game, my hand's like numb because it's losing. I would take Viagra when it was cold. Really? Honestly, because it's a vasodilator, and it would help me get blood flow to my arm, not in a bad way, but so.
That opens up a lot of questions, but I'm not going to do that. But you did overcome that.
Huh?
Yeah, you did overcome that. Came through that.
So I mean, it was cold. I was, you know, doing all kinds of things to try to keep warm, and at some point you're like, and you can't necessarily go tell that to the club because they just want you to perform. They don't need to know that like, hey, I'm self-medicating over here to try to post up on, you know, for an inning tonight. So it just became a challenge, and so all that stuff is. Fortunately, it never really hurt my arm. Like, I could still throw hard. I could still, you know, had a pretty good, you know, swing and miss ability, I guess you would call it now. But from a longevity standpoint, it was just unreliable to the point where I was like, don't want to sign in a cold weather team, and I don't want to relieve. I want to start. And I'm like, nah, you're going to need to go to the long relief role at this point. So, it was a good run, and I enjoyed all of it.
All right, final question. We got our coaches here, the current Baylor coaches, and Hoots here also. What would be, as a guy who pitched here at Baylor and pitched in the pros, very nice major league career, what would be, if you were sharing with our guys that are here now, what would be some advice you would share with them?
Well, I mean, I think that today's baseball player is a little different than it was when I was even playing, sadly. I mean, we were talking earlier about the amount of information that there is now. And I think it's obviously imperative that guys know what they're good at and learn their skill set and, you know, kind of design what their goal is based on what they're good at. But I think that, you know, the amount of information that they can get, they become, you know, robotic, and they become, you know, just paralyzed by the fact that they've got so much information. At the end of the day, you still go out there and compete, you know, and you get into the moment, and you need to have an idea of what your plan is. But at the end of the day, like, the competing side of it and just being aware is half the battle. Like the best games that I'm pitching, I'm not really worried about what I'm doing. I'm focused on what the hitter's telling me and is he fouling it off late? Is he up on the plate, or is he changing his hand? Like you're just from like a poker standpoint, you're reading the other players more than yourself, looking into it yourself. Because when you're going bad, you're generally going to be evaluating where am I, what's my status, compared to when you have some confidence and you're in a good spot, then you're kind of undressing the opponent, So I think, I think all of that stuff is good, but I think from a standpoint of just having some moderation in between that component and then just being a good competitor. Like I think, you watch you watch games where pitchers that compete, and everyone kind of just gravitates towards that guy. That you need a little bit of emotion to kind of show the fact that you're in it with them, because there are pitchers that are kind of, just ghosts almost, to where they're just kind of, and I appreciated the fact that as my career continued to have, kind of a presence when you pitch, there was something, about it. So, I don't know, you find a certain camaraderie with your teammates as a pitcher that on Saturday when I pitch or on Tuesday when I pitch, like, they look forward to that opportunity. And so I grew up thinking like, we don't want flair, we don't want a bunch of hoopla, and we don't want people drawing attention to themselves. But at the end of the day, like, you've got to be somewhat distinct enough that you differentiate yourself, and trying to make sure that you are in the moment enough to you got to kind of put yourself out there a little bit if you want to push yourself. Otherwise, you can kind of just lay in the weeds and, muddle along. And why not, why not do it? Why not create I wasn't necessarily overly comfortable with being gregarious and talkative, and I know my own personality from having my own father that's kind of like a psychoanalyst of his own. Like, you could see when my personality would change, when the trouble was starting to kick in, I was like, screw everybody else, I'm doing it my way. But when you're going good, you're relaxed and you're kind of like the life of the party, and so you've got to kind of know what your personality is and not try to be somebody that you're not, and try to stay in that part of your personality as much as you can, because that makes you the best version of yourself, So not that was a specific answer, but
no, it's a good answer. It's a good perspective.
Yeah.
That's really good. Well, appreciate you being here with us today.
Sure.
And tell your dad we missed him. Tell him hello for us, and tell Emily we missed her also. And good to hear from you, hear some stories. Folks, our Lunch with a Legend today with Kip Wells. Appreciate it.
Thanks
a lot. Yeah.